Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session. With us, my name is RIYA PRAMANIK, and we are continuing with the course BPSC 143 State Politics in India. In today's session, we will be learning about Unit 10, that is Electoral Politics, and Unit 11, that is Leadership. So let's start with Electoral Politics Unit 10. And for that, and to introduce this unit, let's start what is electoral politics and why it is important and how it works. So, electoral politics is related to politics that occurs in the context of elections. As we all know that India is a democratic country and the democracy will thrive only if there is a free and fair elections with in every 4 or 5 years. It is different for every country. So, electoral politics is the politics that is related in the context of elections. Although elections take place at a specific period of time, electoral politics starts even before the elections are held. So it is not like that with elections only electoral politics is happening, but it can happen even before the elections as well. Thus, we can say that electoral politics involves not only the occurrence of elections but also patterns of mobilization by political parties and leaders for voting in the elections. The conduct of election in a free and fair manner and extent of participation of people from various social groups is considered as a way to measure the success of democracy. As I already discussed that India is a democracy and also considered to be the largest democracy in the world. So, democracy will only thrive when there is free and fair elections, and every people from every group, every social group, from any social background, educational background, or economical background, he or she can participate as the same way than others. So this is what the core thing in a election or in a democracy. If we talk about India, or we can say that in Indian context, the introduction of the universal adult franchise after the implementation of the constitution in 1950 has enabled every adult who is 18 years old or above to elect as representatives in the elections and after attaining some age to become a candidate to contest elections. So in India, there is universal adult franchise where after attaining a certain age, that is 18 as per Indian constitution, every adult, whether he is belong to the marginalized section of the society or from a very rich background or highly educational background, both are same and they are treated equal in front of Indian laws. So with the enactment of constitution in the year 1950, universal adult franchise was implemented, and also there is a provision in Indian constitution where after attaining a certain age, a person can also contest elections. So, for first time, all adults in India were eligible to participate in voting. Was the general election held in 1951 and 1952. So, because the election started in the later half of 1951 and continued till mid 1952, that is why this election is often written as 1951-52 elections. So this was the first time when all the adults of India participated equally in voting procedures. Prior to that, like before 1951, there was no universal franchise in India. It was restricted franchise. So now we will learn what is this restricted franchisee is. So the restricted franchisee means that voting rights and right to contest elections was restricted certain sections of society who possess wealth, paid rent to the government, had educational qualifications, etc. So people who are belong to this category, that who belongs who owns wealth or paid rent to the government, they are only allowed to participate in the votings or the election. So that is why it is known as the restricted franchise. So in terms of the participation of people, there are two types of elections. Now we will see what are the two types of elections, and it is very important because both these types of elections are practiced in Indian context. So the first type is the direct elections and the other one is the indirect elections. Let's talk about the direct elections. In direct elections, people directly elect their representatives, whereas in the indirect elections, people elect their representatives indirectly through the member of parliament at all Indian level. MLAs or MLCs at the state. Let's talk about the indirect elections. Indirect elections are held for the post of president, vice president, and the members of Rajya Sabha. So we can see that in Indian context, both direct and indirect elections are practiced in our country. So the electoral politics in India takes place with the purpose of electing representatives into three kinds of institutions. So where we elect our representatives, it is in the Lok Sabha, legislative assemblies, and institutions of local government such as the Panchayati Raj institutions in the rural and municipalities in the urban area. So in these three areas, in these three institutions, we elect our representatives. So in India, between the year 1951 and 1971, general elections of the Lok Sabha and elections to the legislative assemblies were held together. So, with in the year from starting from the year 1951 to 1971, the elections of the Lok Sabha and the legislative assemblies were happening together. Since 1971, they have been held separately. After the year 1971, both the Lok Sabha elections happen in a different time and legislative assembly elections happen in a different time. So, indeed, the frequency of elections in India to Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies has been increasing over the years. Also, it is majorly seen after the advent of 1990s decade, and after that, the elections happened in a very regular manner and increased in numbers. Elections are the hallmark of liberal constitutional democracy. India adopted a federal system of governance and has a provisions for an institution of election commission for conducting and managing free and fair elections. A democracy can only thrive when people are allowed to vote, allowed to give their consent to a policy, and allowed to elect their representatives in a free and fair manner. If people are not given that much of freedom, then we can say that democracy is not there. So for a democracy to run, it is very important that people are given the opportunity for a free and fair elections. The part 15 of the Indian constitution deals with the elections for the parliament of India. This is very important thing to remember. It is the part 15 of the Indian constitution which deals with the election of the parliament of India and legislative assemblies and councils in the states. Also, which is very important article in our constitution, it is article 324, where the election commission of India is the institution responsible for the management of elections at the union and state levels. So apart from these articles and parts, there is also article 170 of the Indian constitution that has provisions about the elections of the state assemblies. So these articles, article 324, article 170 and part 15 are very important for you all to know regarding elections. Now let's move forward to explaining the electoral politics in Indian states. Now we will be moving forward and see how this electoral politics is happening in the Indian states. So there is a lot of literature on electoral politics and party system and leadership associated with the electoral politics in India. So this subject of to study the elections is known as psephology. This is, you have to note it down that psephology is the term used when a person is studying the elections. So the subject is known as psephology. In India, state politics as a subject of study became popular following the decline of the Congress by the late 1960s. So it is after the late 1960s time period when this study became very popular. So by this time, there emerged state level parties in several states. As we learned in our previous sessions, how the regional parties emerged after the decline of the Congress. So this was the time when various state level parties emerged. Some of these were founded by the prominent leaders who had strong support base in their respective states. So many of these leaders emerged who had emerged were earlier members of the Congress. So from the Congress only, these leaders just left the Congress and started their own parties. So this emergence of regional level leaders and parties reflect the rise of various social groups and their aspiration in different states. These aspirations were basically related to their region, their caste, language, religion, culture, etc. Such political parties, also known as regional or state parties, gradually acquired a crucial role in national level politics during the 1990s decade. So, after emerging from you can say that it emerged from Congress many times. When they break from the Congress and started their own parties based on their regional aspirations and various caste, language, religion, and cultural issues. So these parties became very important and played a crucial role in the national level politics as well, being a state party. So we can say that the elections in India have been studied since the 1960s. Broadly, there are three methodological approaches for studying the elections in India. So, the first method is survey research, second is ecological analysis, and fieldwork or ethnography. So, these are the three methodological approaches for studying the elections. Rajni Kothari and Myron Wiener pioneered the survey based elections studies in India. So, from the 1960s, election studies have passed through different phases. So, after a gap of around 20 decades, election studies became again not 20, it's 2. So, after a gap of around 2 decades, election studies became again popular with the study of the 1984 Lok Sabha election by David Butler and Pranay Roy. So, different scholars studied politics in different states. Attempts to study politics have continued since then. So, we can say that this was the time when the studying of elections started. These studies focused on different aspects of state politics like elections, parties, leadership, and patterns of mobilization, how people are mobilized by these political parties. These are the subjects which needed to be studied, and people studied upon this. So, election studies became more popular from the 1990s onward. So, the leading role in conducting election studies in India is played by the CSDS, that is Center for the Studies of Developing Societies. They study the elections and bring reports about the elections and election results and analysis of the election, how election happened and who won and why there is a possibility of winning of election. All these studies were conducted by the Center for the Studies of Developing Societies, short form is CSDS. So, beside election studies are conducted by individual scholars. Apart from these studies, there is also opinion poll. So, we should understand that there is a difference between the election studies and the opinion polls. So, opinion polls on voting patterns is also a subject matter of analysis, and there is a difference, as I told you. The scope of the former is broader. So it seeks to relate the electoral process with social, economic, and political factors or context. The latter is confined to knowing the opinion of the voters about their choice of voting in election. So we can say that the election studies are broader and the opinion poll only confined to the knowing the opinion of the voters about their choice of voting. Now let's move on to electoral politics and democratization because they go hand in hand. So since last decade of the 20th century, two important developments took place in the electoral politics in India. So now let's see what are these two important developments. The first one is the participation of diverse sections of the society in voting in the elections increased. So who these sections of people are? They are basically the marginalized section of the society, mainly the women, tribals, Dalits, OBCs, and the rural classes. A vigilant election commission and rise in the level of political consciousness on the significance of voting has resulted in participation of larger people in elections. So this period saw how in the last decade of the 20th century, these marginalized section also started participating in the voting procedures with enthusiasm. The second development which took place in this last decade of the 20th century is the profiles of the people's representatives in the state legislative assemblies, which undergone a remarkable changes. In the initial decades after independence, the people's representatives mostly belong to the economically and socially more privileged groups. So, after independence, who were the people who were representing the population of our country? They were basically people who have a very strong economical and social background. This trend witnessed a shift during the 1980s, basically the late 1980s. So, the composition of the parliament also become very diverse in this period. So, apart from the higher castes, participation of people representatives belonging to the OBCs, Dalits, women, etc., has increased tremendously. So, this period saw these two developments. However, this composition is not uniform across the states. Some observers have argued that electoral politics in India has led to an increase in democratization because the participation of people became very huge, and not only it restricted to the only socially and economically dominated class, but many other marginalized section also started participating with wholeheartedly. So it is believed that the electoral politics in India has led to an increase in democratization. Generally, weaker sections, Dalits, OBCs, women, religious minorities have been alluded to as Bahujans in academic and popular discourse. The increase in their participation in elections from the last two decades of the 20th century has been conceptualized as their second democratic upsurge, and this term was coined by Yogendra Yadav. So it is very important because increase in their participation in election from the last two decades of the 20th century, it is known as the second democratic upsurge. Let's start with the changing patterns in electoral politics. The elections in Indian states have witnessed a paradigm shift in the past few decades. The shift can be seen in some patterns in the electoral politics, alliances, and fronts of the regional parties with national or state level leaders. The increasing role of smaller parties led by single caste leaders or small parties in electoral politics of some states such as UP, Bihar, and Tamil Nadu. An increasing role of money and crime. So, this is what we will be learning in this part, where we will be seeing how the electoral politics pattern changed over time. In UP, the BSP has made alliance with the Samajwadi Party in the 1993 to 1995 and formed the government after winning the 1993 assembly election, and formed government four times with the help of BJP. So in 1995 and 2007. In Northeast India, the regional parties have formed Northeast Democratic Alliance, also known as NEDA. Small parties such as Apna Dal and Suhel Dev Bharatiya Samaj Party (SBSP) in Eastern UP bargain with the national or regional parties, including the BJP, to have an alliance for a share in power. Rashtriya Lok Samta Party led by Upendra Kushwaha or Hindustani Awam Morcha led by Jitan Ram Manjhi in Bihar bargained with the bigger regional parties such as JDU and RJD. So these are the changes in the pattern of electoral politics in India. So generally, such parties press for the acceptance of demands about recognition of social and cultural symbols and social justice. In South India, several smaller parties such as ADMK, PMK, MDMK, and MIMK, led by individual leaders and identified with specific caste, have become to play an important role in the electoral politics in Tamil Nadu. In addition, there has been a close nexus between the regional political parties and business groups. So the former need money, the political parties need money from business groups to contest elections. If they win elections and form the government, they repay business groups by promoting the business interest of these groups. So, besides, along with money, crime also impacts electoral politics in India, which is uh, one thing which we should remember. And there are many attempts to reduce this crime and politics thing. Now, let's talk about the issues in the state election. What are some issues which are concerning for the state elections? There are various issues determining people's choice in election. These issues are of different types. So, what are these issues? The economic, social, cultural, and political issues. The number these issues are unlimited. However, there are some impacts on the daily life of the people. Some of these issues are availability of employment, price rise, inflation, school and hospitals, road and transport facilities, social justice, welfare programs, recognition of social, religious, cultural symbols of different social groups, governance, law and order, etc. So, different political parties and leaders mobilize people on these issues. So, with the rise of the political parties identified with the Dalits and OBCs in the north and the BJP since the 1990s, and the presence of such parties in South India, especially in Tamil Nadu, since before the issues about caste related justice, recognition of cultural symbols associated with different groups, then the religious based mobilization have been principal focus of the electoral mobilization that happened in the state elections. So BJP has made a consistent effort to create a large thing like mobilizing people on the religious basis. So we can say that these are the issues which concern BJP, and its agenda is of cultural mobilization that witnessed a major change in the past few decades. So, electorally, it has shown flexibility to accommodate and mobilize various social groups with the purpose of create a pan-Indian identity. So, BJP's increasing vote share across the states in various elections can be seen as a success of the party's strategy. So, for example, in the Northeast India, protection of regional and ethnic identities and political identities has been a prime focus of election campaigns. Similarly, before the formation of new states like Uttarakhand, Jharkhand, and Telangana, formation of new states used to be principal issues of mobilization. So, this is also a reason for which the political parties mobilize the citizens. So, in the demands relating to the regional identities, some regions allege that regions were discriminated against in comparison to other regions by state or central governments or by the leadership belonging to other regions. And their problems can be resolved by getting states of their own or by some kind of political autonomy. So, in some elections, there are also issues emerging from the economic reforms. So, in this part, we will be learning about the economic reforms and its impact. So, the economic reforms, as we all know, as we have studied in our previous session, that it was introduced in the early half of the 1990s decade, basically 1991, and it has also reflections on the state politics, including the electoral politics. Leaders of various parties in the state also tried to evolve their own model of economic growth and development. So, different leaders focused on different sectors of economic growth, which we will learn in this part. So, India also witnessed a range of policy experiments with regards to different sectors by various state level parties. Some issues caused by the economic reforms also became a focus of elections in some states. So, while some argued that decreasing the role of the state in the economic reforms will impact the welfare policies adversely, whereas others argued that it will remove restrictions from the private sector. So the chief ministers of different states vied to attract private investment in their respective states. So we will see how the leaders from different states took this economic reforms and how they utilized this economic reform for the welfare of their own states. So India also witnessed a range of policy experiments that these chief ministers have done in different sectors by various state level parties. So let's talk about Chandrababu Naidu's effort to make Hyderabad a software industrial hub. whereas S.F. Krishna wanted to make Bangalore a new center of service sector development. And now we talk about Narendra Modi's effort as a chief minister of Gujarat. He invited more FDIs, foreign direct investments, in infrastructural developments as some such examples. So there was also acquisition of land for setting up these factories or SEZ, that is special economic zones. So it became a necessity for attracting the private investment. So, in some states, acquisition of land became a central issue to mobilize the electoral politics. Two examples are very relevant for politicization of land acquisition in the electoral politics. The first is the politics of land acquisition in the western Uttar Pradesh, and the second is the Nandigram in the West Bengal. So, in both these cases, electoral politics took place on the question of land acquisition by the respective governments. Now, we also have to remember that by this time, when the economic reform in India was introduced, it coincided with the implementation of the Mandal Commission report. So, it gave a rise to a demand for recognition as OBCs by some caste, in which might enable them to avail the reservation or other policies about the affirmative action in some states, such as by Jats in Rajasthan and Haryana, by Patels and Marathas in Gujarat and Maharashtra, demands by the Gujars in Rajasthan for recognition as STs. The demand for subdivision of OBC quota between more backward sections and less backward among the OBCs in different states. There were also demand of some MBCs, that is most backward classes in UP, for their recognitions as STs and SCs. So these were the issues that was bothering the electoral politics, and that is the changing pattern, we can say, which changes over time from one phase to another. And this is how the electoral politics in our country behaved, and basically in the state level elections. So with this, we end with this unit, that is unit 10. Now we will move forward to unit 11, that is about the leadership. This unit is also very important as like the electoral politics in India from exam point of view, because these leadership qualities and the electoral politics in state became the essence of this unit, essence of this course, that is state politics in India. How state politics in India is behaving, how the elections are happening, and why state politics India we are studying. It is very important to know that because of few leaders who emerged as a very powerful regional leaders, and who can in India is becoming so important to understand, and leadership is one of them. So to start with leadership, let's introduce what is the importance of leadership in a democracy, why democracy requires a importance of leadership. So we can say that in any democracy, leadership is one of the most important parts of the political system, and it plays a multiple roles. So what are the roles that these leadership qualities of a person plays? So it helps articulate the interest of the people first. Second is formulating the policies for them. Third is providing an ideological orientation when needed, and then chalking out the strategies to mobilize them into collective actions. Fifthly, it represents them in the electoral bodies at different levels. So these are the five importance of leadership we could count, and these roles can be played as a single act or by a single leader also. So different roles are played by different leaders, and some leaders also do not join a party or institution formally. They just lead people in an apolitical way. So it is not necessary that if you are a leader of something, or if you are fighting for some issue, you are leading that group or leading that part of the society for some issues. It is not compulsory that you have to be a part of a political party. Without being a part of political party as well, you can lead a group or a social group for a particular issue. So we can say that in a culturally diverse society such as India, there are leaders that represent different identity groups as well. So leaders belong to a particular caste, language, region, gender, or religion. So these are the identity groups from which leaders can belong to, and they mostly focus on the issue that concern the specific group. So if a leader is from a particular caste group, his or her focus will be on the issues or the concerns of that specific group. So we can now see, we can learn in this part that what are the different phases of leadership, and that we will be completing in a chronological way. So there are different phases from where the leaders just rose up, and they played a very important role, starting with the leadership during the Nehruvian era, that is the 1950s till mid 1960s. Then comes the emergence of the regional leadership. As I told you that with the declining of the Congress in the late 1960s, there was a rise of the regional leadership in various states. And thirdly, the leadership in the neoliberal era that started from the 1990s after the implementation of the economic reforms in our country. So we will be learning about these three phases of leadership in a chronological manner. So let's start with the leadership during the Nehruvian era. That means it starts from the 1950s and continued till the mid 1960s, till the death of Nehru, first Prime Minister of India. So, the leadership in India during the first two decades, that is, after independence, the first two decades, especially during the Nehruvian era, played a decisive role in laying out the foundation of the modern India. Because at that point of time, India was so devastated because of the partition and all the consequences of partition, and we were left alone to run the country on our own, and for which we hadn't any experience before, because we were colonized for the past 190 to 200 years. So it was a very huge task for India to follow its roots, and then continuing with the democracy, and it was a tough task for the leaders at that point of time to control India's situation. So this Nehruvian era played a decisive role in laying out the foundation of a modern India. So a large number of leaders at that point of time were product of the guided process of social and economic change in the country. So they were intellectuals who reflected on social, economical, and political transformation in the light of democratic principles. Some of them also had participated in shaping the Constitution of India by participating in the Constituent Assembly debates. So the leaders at that era, they were also part of the Constituent Assembly, which shaped the Constitution of India. So among these leaders were the name of these leaders, few names, that is Jawaharlal Nehru, B.R. Ambedkar, Jayaprakash Narayan, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, Lal Bahadur Shastri, E.M.S. Namboodiripad, Ram Manohar Lohia, Jayaprakash Narayan, etc. So, indeed, reflecting true democratic nature of Indian politics, in the initial phases of the independence, the Nehru cabinet consisted of leaders from the Congress party as well as those of the non-Congress, such as B.R. Ambedkar and Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. In contrast, some leaders of the Nehruvian era were part of the government. Some mobilized people and critiqued the government's policy from outside the government. So, in this phase, we can see that Jawaharlal Nehru, as the Prime Minister of India, played a leading and decisive role in shaping the strategies and policies for the development of India. As I told you, it was the time when India was experiencing devastation because of economic constraints, because of administrative. There were many problems in administration, economics, and also India was partitioned into two countries. So all things were very haphazard at that point of time, and it required a strong leader to just to handle the problems at that point of time. So it is visualized that the modern India on the principles of secularism, non-alignment, and mixed economy, the developmental model was introduced by Nehru, which is known as the Nehruvian model. So in this model, the state played a leading role in formulating and implementing policies. So here in this Nehruvian model, it is the state who is playing a decisive and very leading role for implementing the policies and formulating it. So this was also, we should remember that everything goes hand in hand. So this was the time when Congress leader was very strong, but this was also the phase when the Congress dominance was everywhere. So it was the time when the as per Rajni Kothari, the Congress system was going on. So the Congress dominance also was there in most states, and the state governments were led by the Congress. So, in the system, while at the national level, the leadership and policy direction was provided by Jawaharlal Nehru. At the state level, it was provided by the state level leadership. In most of the states, Congress, and in some states such as Kerala, by the Congress as well as the non-Congress. So there were also leadership at the state level to handle issues at the state level problems. So although the blueprints of these policies and directives were provided by the national level government, that is the union list, and actual implementation of these policies was done at the state level. So the guidelines were given by the national level policies, but the policies of the state levels were implemented there. Thus, the national and state level leadership played a decisive role in introducing policies across the states, that is, the land reforms, welfare policies, affirmative action, development of institutions and infrastructure, etc. So the dominance of the Congress party or the Congress system also did not mean that the non-Congress leadership was absent in the country. We should not think that because it is the Congress system, Congress is everywhere in the most of the states in our country, it should not be believed that non-Congress leadership was missing at that point of time. What it meant, the Congress system is meant was that the Congress provided leadership in most states, but in several other states, the leaders of the non-Congress parties plays an important role. So, what are these examples? That the one example is Kerala, where the communist leader Namboodiripad led the Kerala government for 2 years. An experiment has never done anywhere in the world. So, the government, why it is experiment? Because where a communist-led government was formed following an election victory. So it was the first time when, after winning the election, the communist government was formed. Also, the government under the leadership of Namboodiripad implemented land reforms in Kerala. So the leaders from the socialist parties such as the SSP, PSP, and Gandhians produced a critique of the policies of the Congress government and underlined the significance of need for the policies concerning the welfare of farmers and the reservation for the OBCs, especially in the North Indian states such as Bihar and UP. Whereas in the south of India, CM Annadurai highlighted the significance of self-respect and the culture of Tamil populace. So for different states, the issues are different. So the period following the death of Nehru was marked by a shift in the nature of national level leadership. So there was a shift in the national level of leadership because till that time Nehru was the one who was controlling all the policies and implementing. He was a very strong leader. But after Nehru's death, there was a question that arises, who will lead now? So this was also a period in which the popularity of the Congress declined. So after the death of Nehru, there was a time period which started where there was a decline in the Congress's popularity also in several states. There was also food crisis, drought, inflation contributed to the resentment of people against the dominant party and leadership. And about all these things we learned in our last session. So the opposition leaders belonging to the socialist parties such as SSP, PSP, the Janasangha, Swatantrata Party, the Communist parties, the Republican Party of India mobilized people into movements in non-electoral politics, and the resentment against the Congress was reflected in the defeat of Congress in 1967-69 elections. So in the post-Nehru phase, we can say the Congress factionalism within the Congress party intensified, posing challenges to its leadership in several states as well as at the all India level. And this resulted in the emergence of a state level leadership in the late 1960s and 1970s and formation of the new parties by them. So some of these leaders graduated from state level to national level leadership, and this also heralded the end of the emergence of state level leadership, that is from late 1960s to 1980s. So this was also a 20-year period where we can see that after the defeat of the Congress in 1967-69 elections in several states marked the end of the Congress system, and it was accompanied by the emergence of new leadership. So decline of Congress also paved way for new leadership, and some of them were in the Congress and were also active in politics in the pre-independence period. So it is not like that very few very new leaders emerged at that point of time, but there were leaders who were also part of the politics before the independence. So their differences within the Congress emerged over policies, issues, and strategies, and factionalism within the Congress led to their exit from the party. And now these leaders tried to maintain or try to become a very important leader at the state level. So they founded their own parties and represented the aspirations either uh, of specific states, regions, or of social and specific groups. So, those among them who had enduring impact on the state level politics were Charan Singh in the North India, Devi Lal in Haryana, Biju Patnaik in Odisha, Jyoti Basu in West Bengal, Karunanidhi and M.G. Ramachandran in Tamil Nadu. So, these were the leaders who emerged and impacted the state level politics a lot. Some even graduated to impact national politics, drawing their support from specific state or the region. So this trend continued till the next two decades, and that is 1970s and 1980s. Although some of them were active in politics of their states even prior to the 1970s, but by this time they played leading role either as the chief minister or the opposition leaders. So this was a gradual rise in their power of these leaders after the decline of the Congress. So Karpuri Thakur in Bihar, NTR in Andhra Pradesh, Devraj Urs in Karnataka are some examples which represent this pattern of leadership. So some of them became the symbols, guides, ideologues of social groups and parties espousing the cause of the marginalized communities. So there were also leaders who started highlighting the cause of the marginalized section of the society. So the emergence of state level leadership has been explained in the literature in a following way. So let's see what are the ways in which these state level leadership was explained. So it was marked by a rise of the aspirations of new social groups. New social groups here means the farmers, the backward classes who had benefited from the state policies such as land reform, green revolution, and who looked for an alternative relationship at the local level. So these social groups benefited from the state level policies and they became a very important part of state level politics. So, likewise, Charan Singh provided leadership to the farming communities and other backward classes in North India, especially Uttar Pradesh. So he participated in the national movement and remained in the Congress till 1969. He was also the chief minister of Uttar Pradesh twice. So Charan Singh played a leading role in the formulation of land reform policies in Uttar Pradesh, mobilized the other backward classes, especially the farming communities, while within the Congress, he critiqued the policies of the Congress, especially the resolution that aimed to introduce cooperative farming. So, next, the leader which also impacted the national politics and state level politics a lot, it is Jai Prakash Narayan, who is popularly known as JP. So JP was a socialist leader and participated in the national movement. In the post-independence period, his most important role was to mobilize people against the authoritarian rule, which resulted in the imposition of emergency. So emergency was imposed in the year 1975, and after that, Jayaprakash Narayan mobilized people against this authoritarian rule. So this movement is known as JP movement. So, Jayaprakash Narayan mobilized various sections of the society and especially the students uh, into the JP movement. So, they brought changes in social, political, economic structures of the society. He also termed such transformation as total revolution. So you have to remember that it is the Jayaprakash Narayan who termed this transformation, who the changes in the social, political, and economic structure in the society as total revolution. He was incarcerated during the emergency. After his release from the jail, following the lifting of emergency, he was instrumental in the formation of the Janata Party. So, Janata Party was the party who won the election in the after the emergency ended. So JP was one of the most important instrument in bringing Janata Party together. So this party emerged from the merger of five parties. He never joined any government. We should remember that also JP created, or he was an instrumental in the formation of Janata Party, but he never joined any government. So there were some also youth leaders who joined the JP movement and continued to play leading role. So these were Lalu Prasad Yadav, Nitish Kumar, Ram Vilas Paswan, and Sushil Kumar Modi were also examples who was the student, or the we can say the youth, with youth leaders who joined the JP movement back then. Now let's come to N.T. Ramarao, who formed the Telugu Desam Party in the year 1982. He was the Chief Minister of undivided Andhra Pradesh. Indeed, he was the first non-Congress Chief Minister of the state. So before N.T. Ramarao, before he founded the Telugu Desam Party, it was Congress which ruled Andhra Pradesh, and N.T. Ramarao became the first non-Congress Chief Minister of the state. He mobilized diverse sections of Andhra Pradesh on the question of restoring. So the Telugu Pride, Telugu Jati, Gaurav Man, and all these things were the issues about which N.T. Ramarao was campaigning. So he complained that the central government led by the Congress did not treat the leaders from Andhra Pradesh respectfully. And N.T. Ramarao promised to restore it by forming the government run by the Telugu Desam. So he introduced the Andhra Pradesh the populist policies such as the midday meal scheme for school children, supply of rice and clothes for the poor, construction of houses for the poor and backward classes, subsidized electricity charges for the farmers. All these policies, which became very popular, was introduced by N.T. Ramarao. So now let's move to Karpuri Thakur of Bihar. So Karpuri Thakur occupies a special place in leadership of India, especially in the Hindi-speaking region. So he participated in the Indian national movement and was the Chief Minister of Bihar twice. He was a member of Bihar Legislative Assembly for around 4 decades. So he was a socialist leader. As the Chief Minister of Bihar, he introduced reservation policy for the backward classes through a formula that came to be known as Karpuri Thakur formula. So what this Karpuri Thakur formula is? So according to this formula, he subdivided the reservation quota meant for the OBCs into different categories like extremely backward classes and other subgroups. The Karpuri Thakur formula often becomes a reference point in the discussion on reservation policies for the OBCs. So after his death, Lalu Prasad Yadav and Nitish Kumar emerged as leaders with a strong support base among the backward classes in Bihar. So after the death of Karpuri Thakur, it was Lalu Prasad Yadav and Nitish Kumar who has a very strong base among these backward classes in Bihar mobilized by Karpuri Thakur. Now let's talk about Assam. In 1980s, Assam saw the emergence of new leadership. But here the leadership is different. Why? Because this leadership emerged from the student movement. So in Assam, the 6 years movement, anti-foreigners movement, was led by All India Assam movement. So after the movement was over, the student who launched the anti-foreigners movement founded a regional party and named the party as Assam Gana Parishad. So some leaders of ASU, the short form of the movement, became leaders of the Assam Gana Parishad, and Prafulla Kumar Mahanta became the Chief Minister of Assam twice. Indeed, the BJP leaders like Sarbananda Sonowal and Hemanta Biswa Sarma, both became Chief Minister of Assam, started their political careers from this as a student leaders. So it is noteworthy that the emergence of leadership in Assam from the student leaders, it is it is a pattern of not only Assam but also the Northeast India. Now let's move forward to the leadership from the 1990s. So this in the political and social context of the particular period. So the leadership from 1991 functioned and emerged in the changed context. So, when we are coming from chronologically, the first was the Nehruvian era, the second is the rise of the regional leaders or with issues like caste, religion, and farming. So, these were the issues from which the leadership emerged. Now, in the 1990s, the issues changed. Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, along with the Finance Minister Manmohan Singh, introduced reforms. This was the time when economic reform was instituted, and this played a very decisive role to the market along with the state in relation to development in the country. So, Manmohan Singh later became Prime Minister of India, and this period also saw an increase in the role of identity politics, which is very important to note down because this was the time when various castes like Dalits, OBCs, and various religion and women also become very important for the electoral politics, and they were mobilized and they were participating wholeheartedly in the electoral process. So these changes were reflected in the nature of leadership as well. So, some of the important characteristic of leadership of this period are the new generation of OBC and Dalit leadership, women leadership, role of dynasty in the form of leadership, and increase in the role of leadership that underline the significance of religion-based cultural nationalism. So we can say that the process of emergence of leadership, especially among the OBCs and Dalits, continued in the forthcoming period. So despite their differences, such leadership share a common vision on social justice and welfare. These are the common grounds for these leaders. So we can say that there are many leaders like Mayawati, Nitish Kumar, which became very important leaders in this time period. Now let's move forward to the women's leadership. So the leadership in India is dominated by men, as we are learning chronologically since Nehruvian era till 1990s. We can see that it is only men who are becoming the leader. However, the towering presence of Indira Gandhi marked the presence of women in mainstream politics, especially in the role of prime minister, which did bring out a visual change from the otherwise male dominated space for leadership. So, there was also the rise in demand for granting women reservation in the legislative bodies, which has not yet been accepted. So, however, the provision of 33% reservation for women in Panchayati Raj institutions and municipalities has resulted in the representation of these women in the local institutions of government. So, although in India the women leadership in these institutions has faced severe challenges of deep-rooted cultural conditioning by because of the patriarchy, the gradual increase in their participation has made women confident. So at one hand they are facing challenges because of the deep rooted cultural conditioning by patriarchy, but on the other hand the increase in their participation made the another women confident and conscious of their own rights. So at the state levels in the post independent period, women have provided leadership in various states as chief minister with varying durations of the tenures in office. So, what are the examples of these women leaders at state level? Sucheta Kripalani in Uttar Pradesh, Anandi Ben Patel in Gujarat, Anwara Taimur in Assam, Mehbooba Mufti in Jammu Kashmir before the state was bifurcated into two unions, that is Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh, Mayawati in Uttar Pradesh, Jayalalitha in Tamil Nadu, and Mamta Banerjee in West Bengal. Also, there was Rabri Devi in Bihar. So, the three leaders, namely Mayawati, Mamta Banerjee, and Jayalalitha, may be seen as a representative examples of women leadership. So, Mayawati, the leader of the BSP, the Bahujan Samaj Party, became Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh 4 times. And The party was influenced by ideologies and life of B.R. Ambedkar and Kanshiram as Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh. She introduced policies of the welfare of the Dalits and backward classes, especially through the Ambedkar village programs. So she also devised policies and schemes for recognition of cultural symbols associated with the thinkers and icons espousing the cause of social justice. Among the three, Mamta Banerjee's case is different. Why? It is very important to understand. So, the parties to which Mayawati and Jayalalitha belonged were founded by their leaders like BSP by Kanshiram and AIADMK by MG Ramachandran. But Mamta Banerjee's party, Trinamool, by Mamta Banerjee. So Mamta Banerjee is the person who started this party, whereas Mayawati and Jayalalitha became leader of a party which was already founded by the leaders like Kanshiram BSP and AIADMK by MG Ramachandran. So Mamta Banerjee entered politics as a youth Congress leader and left Congress to form the Trinamool Congress. So she mobilized farmers in Nandigram and Shingur against the land acquisition by the left front government. She became Chief Minister of Bengal thrice, that is 2015, 2016, 20, till 2021, and then in 2021 also she got re-elected. So she formed her first government after defeating the left front which ruled West Bengal for 35 years. So Mamta Banerjee is a women leader who challenged the already established left front government for 35 years and challenged that and became the chief minister of West Bengal. So to sum up, leadership is an important aspect of the democratic political system. In India, leadership played a significant role in building modern India. So it operates in various capacities like chief ministers, opposition leaders, members, and leaders of political parties and non-party leaders. It is not like that leadership can only exist when it is about the prime minister or council of minister. It can happen at a very you can say non-party leaders also played a very important role. So in the post-independence period, the leadership in India can be viewed in three phases as we learned, that is Nehruvian phase, and then comes the 1960s to 1980s phase, the mid phase, and then the 1990s onwards after the economic reform. So with this, we end up our today's session. Thank you.